Hey, Rude Boy, you're now dealing with the one and only Soul Nation on 104.6 FM.
Straight out of South Central Manchester.
Do not attempt to adjust your radio.
Pirate radio stations in the northwest now outnumber the legal stations by 2 to 1. They claim they are outlawed and priced out of the radio market unfairly. Some pirate stations are short-lived. Others invest in sophisticated equipment and are determined to survive. One of them is Soul Nation in Manchester, created and managed by Tony Stevens, also known as DJ T2Badd.
The actual concept for Soul Nation started 3 years ago, but it's been on air for over 2.5 years.
Good afternoon, Soul Nation.
There was a massive gap in the market. Other stations who were playing music, I don't know who for, but it wasn't for the majority of the people who I knew anyway.
I've been listening to Soul Nation for about 2 years. I found it by accident on the radio dial and I've been listening to it ever since. I tend to listen to it more often than not when I'm working. The music's of a tempo that's nice to work with. I do listen to other radio stations, but nothing about anywhere near Soul Nation.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'd just run them out of town. I mean, you don't have unlicensed ambulances plying for trade around the streets. If I wandered into a hospital and started taking somebody's appendix out, I'd be prosecuted. You don't have unlicensed dentists. Why should these people just string a bit of wire out of a block of flats somewhere in Manchester and call themselves a pirate radio station?
I listen to Soul Nation, Manchester. That's a good radio station. I like pirate radio stations because they were like more underground. They hit the scene more.
You got a glow that just surrounds you.
I don't believe there is a place for pirate radio stations. I feel that it's unfair that there isn't a level playing field. We have to work very, very hard to get our licenses, and we have to keep fighting to get them back every 8 years. If somebody comes along and just opens up a transmitter, it's hardly a fair and level playing field.
Fleximos as a junior football club relies on sponsorship from people to help us fund the needs of these young boys who wish to play football regularly at least once a week. And without people like Tony and Soul Nation, we wouldn't be able to survive.
We've taken a lot of advice setting up the station from people who've done ILR radio most of their lives. The operation which we have here, whilst not being as obviously upmarket as a legal entity, as far as I'm concerned, will far outstrip any of your so-called pirates around the country. I think unlicensed broadcaster is more of a fair comment for Soul Nation. I believe that the people who are at Soul Nation now want success bad enough to go to almost any length to gain that success. Success for us is gaining a legitimate license of a wide enough broadcasting area so we can do ourselves justice. Being raided is a constant worry for us. That's why we invest thousands of pounds in equipment, quality equipment, to try and outfox the DTI.
I think pirate radio since the early 1970s, certainly land-based pirate radio, has been a history of cultural omission. And if you trace the pirates from, say, Invicta and JFM in the 70s, right through to the current pirates, there's a history of soul music and black urban dance music in general that's been omitted by the legal channels of broadcasting. I think Pirate radio should exist when it's fulfilling a cultural need or tendency that the legal channels aren't fulfilling. It's as simple as that.
On the day of its second birthday party, just as the year is coming to an end, the inevitable happens. Soul Nation's worst fears are realised.
Here's where the detail we're trying to get in. It's using sledgehammers and battering rams and all sorts. We had to nail back on bits of wood here, as you can see it's all chipped off there. But these are like £400 security doors, and they were there for about 15 minutes to try to get through and all that. They'd have been there all day, so eventually they were let in, you know, save themselves injury and all that. I received a phone call at home. There was a raid actually taking place. So I jumped in the car, made a couple of phone calls and flew down there to find out exactly what happened. When I got here, it was like full of police and DTI and all that. They had on flat jackets and God knows whatever inside was going on, some massive drugs raid or something. Just witnessed them taking all the equipment, like tagging it, putting it in bags. It was like bordering on the ridiculous actually. It was like taking the clocks off the walls and posters that had nothing to do with the station. People like us, we've got no choice. You know, we can't break into this market in the normal way through lack of finance and whatever, even though we know we've got the skills and all that. So the only thing we can do is just try and do it in our own way.
Our job in policing the airwaves is to go for the source of the transmission and remove it, either by taking the transmitter itself, dealing with the aerial, or indeed finding the studio that the pirates use. When we get a call of interference, this is the sort of vehicle that we send out. And in the front of the vehicle here is a direction finding display, and that helps us find where the pirate radio transmitters are, because the direction takes us in the signal string.
This is a monitoring receiver. It's top of the earth, which gives us the direction the signal's coming from, and then signal strength meter, which tells us how close we are.
I have with me some typical examples of pirate radio transmitters. This is one completely encased in a traffic cone, and the idea of this is it gets put in a stench pipe and the wide part of the traffic cone makes it lodge there, but it's the crude technology in the transmitter itself which causes the problems. This is a pirate radio transmitter completely encased in a biscuit tin. And again, the similarity between this and the other transmitter is it's crude technology, won't stay on the frequency, causes interference to other radio services, and that's why we have to take action. Pirates do cause interference to emergency services, and there are real instances of interference to airports, to instrument landing systems at airports, to police services, to fire brigade services, and indeed some of the utilities.
Fire services nationally use two bands, low band VHF operating in AM and FM modulations, and the UHF band operating in FM modulation. In the Greater Manchester area we do not have any interference problems from pirate radio stations.
We do not cause interference. We've got categoric proof and evidence, and anyone who's got any evidence to the contrary, please bring it.
Greater Manchester Ambulance Service has never had any problems with pirate radio stations interfering with any of our airwaves. The service has never been approached by the DTI or questioned about interference by pirate radio stations. We have had interference recorded by taxi companies, and this is particularly during the peak taxi hours, say Friday, Saturday night, and we have had problems of interference then, and we have had to work hard to get around that. Instead of using voice, we're looking to use data transmission. This is where information will be sent via a computer in the control centre directly to an ambulance computer that is located on the dashboard of the ambulance vehicle.
Soul Nation's equipment is built by somebody who builds the BBC's equipment, so our stuff is as good as theirs. The emergency services categorically state that Soul Nation has never ever interfered with their transmissions. So If the emergency services has never complained about us, and the DTI claim they only act on complaints, obviously the complaints have got to come from somebody who's got a vested interest in removing us off the air. Now, you could say it could be a fellow unlicensed broadcaster, but they've got as much right to be there as we have, so obviously they're not going to do it. So who else has got a vested interest in getting us off the air? It then leads you to only one conclusion: it's the legal stations.
I know that Soul Nation don't really want to interfere with commercial radio and legal radio in the Manchester area, but they don't know everything, and they are assuring us that they will try not to. That's been quoted in the press and so on. But they don't know, they're trying not to. I know for a fact that recently we had problems with Soul Nation interfering with our signal. I find that a bad situation.
Well, we pay thousands of pounds a year to the Radio Authority for our licence to transmit. We pay thousands of pounds for the rental of the transmitter. We pay thousands of pounds to the Performing Rights Society, to the other copyright bodies. These people pay nothing. We have to observe all the health and safety regulations, and obviously we're paying rent and rates. We're a legitimate station, and I resent the competition from these people.
The legitimate licensed broadcasters naturally are concerned about the pirates, but for two reasons. Firstly, the pirates operate on frequencies near theirs, so any interference is usually picked up by the licensed broadcasters' listeners. In other words, they can't get the station that they want to tune to on the dial. Secondly, of course, the pirates are actually stealing the advertising revenue from the licensed stations, and that naturally causes some concern.
When we've gone off air after the raid, the advertisers only want to know one thing, like, are you coming back, and that's it. One guy who was nearly in tears, I mean, he started up a business and his business was going down the tubes, and he's advertised with one of the local radio stations, and he says that he didn't get one bit of business. Whereas, like, he's advertised with us now, and he says that within the first week he's had phone calls and inquiries, and that's just within about 4 or 5 days.
We do a lot of research at Piccadilly and Q103. We interview thousands of people. They don't know it's us interviewing them. They tell us what they like to listen to, and there's no particular demand for other sorts of music. If there were, I'd be very open to people talking to us about it.
I was at the Radio Academy conference in 1990 in Glasgow, where the owner of a radio station stood up and said, when people call my radio station bland, I take that as a compliment. Now, when you've got that kind of thinking at high management level in legal radio, there's no wonder we have to have pirate stations.
These stations that say that they cater for the crowd and the listeners that Soul Nation are trying to cater for are basically run by white, middle-aged guys who haven't got a clue about what our style of music is about, and they don't really want to know. It's not a race thing, it's like, you know, it's a cultural thing. I mean, these guys are brought up with The Who and the Bay City Rollers and Mick Jagger and his lot. You know, what we're talking about is a world away from that. But they deem what type of music everybody else must listen to. Soul Nation.
Soul Nation.
Soul Nation.
After 4 months of silence, the Soul Nation team regroups and prepares for a relaunch.
Listen.
Hit it! We are the boys.
You all know what's happened, right? And we've only got ourselves to blame. Hopefully, like me, everyone's learned the lesson.
1, 2, 3.
We're in a no man's land, right? People see us as sort of like a reasonable ILR standard station, but at the end of the day, regardless of what we want to call ourselves, unlicensed, whatever, we're still a pirate. But I want to have a higher grade of operation for the station. I want to do things proper. I ain't no more. This ain't no joke. People have took our things, legit bought stuff, but we know that's the risk that we run, right? I don't want to heighten the risk. trust me, we never got detected. I tell that for nothing. We got grassed. We got grassed. And that could have only come because of somebody in this room here.
The music that we play, majority of it does come from the majors, but they can't very well go out and say that we have anything to do with unlicensed radio stations. What they do, believe me, because they know that we are an integral part of their business. We work hand in hand with them. We need their products to keep our listeners interested. They need us to airplay their stuff unconditionally.
I say whatever it takes, yeah.
It gives you a buzz when you've seen a tune come as a promo, and then you've like nurtured it along and it's got big, and then when you see it hit the charts, and especially in the case of like one or two artists who I've known personally, Gabrielle and China Black and Mark Morrison, all those people each did the first PAs for our organisation.
And meanwhile, you know, their right-hand men, their salesmen are going round to the station saying, do you want 6 copies of this, 7 copies of that? And it's the same now with pirate radio. You know, they get white label copies of pre-release records from all the major record companies ages before anybody else gets them.
It's one of those funny one-sided ones. It only plays on one side, so special DJ one. Sony are very selective about who to send the stuff to anyway. Like stuff like the Fugees, Killing Me Softly and all that. We had all the original promos sent out a few months back. It's easily going to chart. It's a massive track, but it's funny because at the end of the day it's come to the end of its life on Soul Nation, and it's only just now going to start hitting the charts and all that. But I suppose we've done our job.
As an independent promotion company, a lot of major record companies come to us so that we can service the pirate stations. Pirate DJs are the most essential people I send records to, because I know people that are on the case are listening to pirate stations, and if you want to know what the next sound is coming from the underground, you're going to listen to pirate stations.
Just before the start of the Euro 96 soccer tournament, and in the space of a few hours, the DTI raid the major pirate stations in London, Bristol and Manchester and takes them off the air.
Eat it, pumpkin.
Okay, easy. I'm sick and tired of the DTI mithering me. Now, I know they've got a job to do, right? And I can respect the DTI in all of this. Where it gets annoying is where there are people who will turn around and say we don't matter to them, they're insignificant, but they're the people that are constantly on the phone. Get Soul Nation off air, please get them off air.
We have raids against pirate stations going on continually, over 600 in a year, and that's been the pattern for the last 3 or 4 years. If we have particular events coming up where the broadcasters are using frequencies intensely, then of course we're concerned about the effect of pirate radio stations nearby the broadcasting frequencies.
I'm also probably not doing myself any favours by saying this, but you know, who dares wins. As far as I'm concerned, you know, I made a sterner stuff and I'm a determined guy, and I'm fighting to keep what we're doing going, and I'll do it by any means necessary. I'll do it one way or the other.
The Radio Authority has 3 main tasks. We license radio stations, we regulate those stations once they're broadcasting on the air, and we find frequencies for those radio services. The way the authority decides which areas it's going to add to its working list being a list of areas that intends to advertise licenses in during the course of the year, is by the letters that it receives from people from all over the country. We get people who write to us and say they want to set up radio stations. We have been in the business of regulating and licensing stations for some time now, and we can tell who is serious about running a radio station and who isn't.
I think the common theme of legislation is that there is a right way to do it, and that is always very constricting. It's always based on some incredibly sort of narrow English conformist view of what is permissible.
The Radio Authority, when it advertises a licence, it does ask the public for its opinions. It asks the public for its opinion on what type of service it would like in that area. Once we receive the applications, we put them in the local libraries in the areas where we're advertising the licence, and we then ask for comments from the public on those applications and who they think would provide the best service for their area.
I could wipe out pirates like that. That's simple. You know, all they've got to do is, instead of like saying, well, there's a licence going for this area covering such and such square mileage or whatever, why don't they just say, we've identified a need for this sort of music within this broadcast area. Can we have suitable applicants for this licence? That is one way that we'll deal with it. At the end of the day, the boys who are into ragga can turn around and say, well, you know, there's a ragga licence going. Let's either all get together or the best out of all of us go for that. The guys who are into soul, you know, do the same. The guys who are into dance music do the same.
Possibly before 1990, stations did sound the same. The majority of commercial radio stations played pop music. There is money in pop music. But since then, the Radio Authority has been adding tiers to each area, tiers of radio stations. So some areas may have as many as 5 or 6 stations. In London, there are 18 commercial stations, although that's unusual. And they're providing a variety of services.
There's got to be some kind of regulation like this. It can't continue with the jack of all trades type of stations that we've got at the moment, because that is why there is such an explosion across the country of pirates right now.
In London we have dance music, we have easy listening, we have jazz music, we have a station for the Asian community, a black community, Greek community and the Turkish community. And what we're trying to do is advertise more licences outside London, which will broaden listener choice.
They talk about a lighter touch and they talk about deregulation, and it's really nothing of the kind. It's a kind of insidious re-regulation, and it still only lets a certain number of people into the club, you know, into the radio club.
But the licence fee is not that expensive. If you are operating a large Greater London station on FM, then you're talking about around £80,000.
Well, will pirates ever disappear? Some of them are fanatics, some of them exist because of the communities that they serve. I think that there's plenty of opportunities for pirates to go legal. There's the question of digital technology arriving in the not too distant future, which will be a problem for the pirates. And my view is that we will see less of the pirate problem in the years to come because of these two reasons.
The whole emphasis seems to be on the fact that they should conform to the law. My view is change the bloody law, change the rules.
I think it's through the grace of God that we're going to have to do it, and if it's what people actually want, it will come good. It will come through, it will work. Soul Nation will be there in some form of a legal entity, right? Run by the people, for the people, and that people is the Northwest.
Roaming random around YouTube over and out.